Good afternoon and welcome to New Mobility, providing solutions to social and environmental problems in urban slums of developing regions. First, let me introduce my brilliant teammate. Luke Barber, Emily Prus, Alexandra Wilson, Tintin Liu, Jennifer McLaughlin, and Alan Arthur. We would like to thank our advisor Tom Gladwin and our client Dave Burdish from Ford. As many of you know, this project is a continuation of 3 previous master projects involving new mobility. New mobility is a new way of thinking, meeting human needs through accessibility and mobility. The purpose of mobility is to increase an individual's accessibility to transportation solutions through highly integrated, environmentally sound, socially equitable, multimodal transportation. This year, our project will focus on how new mobility can be one solution to slum crisis. As you can see from the graphs, for the first time in human history, more people living in cities than in rural areas. In order to accommodate the rapid growth of cities, which will grow to like 6.4 billion people by 2050, we will need to build 7 new megacities of 10 million people or more every year. One of the results of the rapid growth of the urbanization is a proliferation of slums, particularly in the developing world. Slums are projected to increase to about 2 billion people by 2030, absorbing half of the expected urban influx. This is such a problem that the Target 11 of the United Nations Millennium Development Goals is to achieve significant improvement in the lives of at least 100 million slum inhabitants by 2020. The United Nations Human Settlement Program defines a slum as a settlement with one of or more of those characteristics, like inadequate access to safe water, inadequate access to sanitation and other infrastructure, poor structural quality of housing, overcrowding, and secure residential status. It is important to note that slums vary greatly from city to city, region to region, and country to country. Like slums in Latin America, which are well established and is generally old, so you can see on this side. And the slums in sub-Saharan Africa are recently established and more haphazardly planned, as you can see on that picture. Since slums are often situated on periphery, so transportation is a serious problem for them. The World Business Council on Sustainable Development observed that lack of access to transportation and information are both symptoms of poverty and key factors in keeping communities, families, and nations poor. By creating efficient and integrated transportation system, new mobility has the potential to be one solution to the urbanization of poverty. Our group attempts to examine this problem through 2 different lenses, one micro and applied, the other one is macro and theoretical. The first group will discuss new mobility in São Paulo, Brazil, which is the micro and applied one, and the second group will examine new mobility in sub-Saharan Africa, which is the macro and a theoretical one. Okay, next is Alex.
Thank you, Ting. Okay, so I'm going to begin talking about new mobility in São Paulo. I'll give you a quick presentation outline. I won't spend too much time on this. Here's what we're going to go through. First, I'll talk about our objectives. We had 3 overarching objectives for this part of the project. The first was to gain a thorough understanding of the business climate in São Paulo as it would relate to establishing new mobility hubs. These are factors such as transportation policy and the culture of Brazilian business. The second objective is to understand the slum neighborhoods in São Paulo specifically. I want to mention here that slums are called favelas in Brazil. And finally, we wanted to be able to give recommendations to Ford based on our findings. So our methodology included favela tours. Luke, Emily, and I were fortunate enough to go to São Paulo this past October. We toured 3 favelas. One is Santa Isabela over on the western side. It's very small and very poor. And the second is Pantanal, which is larger and on the eastern side. Here's a photo of Santa Isabela. You can see how poor it is. And compared with that, you have Pantanal, which is much more established. Pantanal has about 8,000 families, which seems relatively large, but in comparison, some of the largest slums in São Paulo are anywhere from 60 to 100,000 people, so it's still not the biggest. After that, in Brazil, as well as in the US, we conducted several interviews with interested parties and organizations, and of course, we had an extensive literature review. So now I'll give you a little bit of background on São Paulo. São Paulo is a megacity, which is defined as having over 10 million people. São Paulo actually has around 19 million people in the metropolitan area. With so many people, you can imagine there's a whole host of transportation issues. You can sort of see in this photo some of the haze. They have a lot of issues with air pollution, especially particulate matter. And another issue is congestion, which anybody in São Paulo will complain about. One of the adaptations to this problem are the helicopters. São Paulo is now known as the helicopter capital of the world. The wealthy will use helicopters for their everyday commutes, as commutes can be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. Another adaptation to this are the ubiquitous use of motorcycles, and you'll see them zipping in between traffic jams on the highways, in the city, everywhere. It's a little bit faster to get around that way, but it's very dangerous. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum from the helicopters, you'll see these all over the city as well as on the highway, these hand carts. The poor will use these hand carts to move around goods and supplies. So clearly the transportation system in São Paulo is very inequitable. And São Paulo itself is known for its inequity. You can see here a large slum pushed right up against a very wealthy neighborhood. So now I think we will move into the findings with Emily.
Okay. Thanks, Lexi. So we started off our project by identifying all of the factors that we thought were important to new mobility just in the city of São Paulo. Obviously, government, academia, NGOs play a role in implementing this solution. This is going to look really similar to things that the previous master's projects did for Bangalore and Cape Town. But then we took these same factors and thought about them from the vantage point of an urban slum. And when we did that, we realized that, that you have to think of infrastructure on 2 different levels, because the infrastructure on Paulista Avenue in the business district is completely different from the infrastructure in Pantanal or Santa Isabela. We also realized that there are very defined relationships. We could have drawn many arrows between these different factors, but we picked out the ones that were most influential. And for the interest of time, we're only going to focus on these factors that actually directly influenced our recommendations. So one of the most influential things was obviously government. Any new mobility situation that would help or affect urban slums is going to involve government on many different levels.